following podcast is part of the Underdog Sports Podcasting Network. For a full list of our shows, as well as breaking sports news and engaging feature stories, visit us at www.theunderdogsports.com.
Talking around the bases with Ryan Carter and Logan Smith.
Welcome to Talking Around the Bases, Episode 9. I'm Ryan Carter, and I'm again with the ever-so-knowledgeable Logan Smith. On this week's episode, we're going to be doing our second half of the projection show that last week we had the awards. This week we're going to be talking about the divisions, who we think is going to come out on top, and how the playoffs are going to go, as well as some spring training updates and looking forward to opening day. So without further ado, Logan, how you doing?
Ryan, man, I'm doing great. We still have some snow on the ground, but with only 5 days until opening day, the winter went by. Obviously, we wish it would have went by quicker, but now the time's finally here. The MLB teams are finishing up spring training, getting ready to head back to their stadiums, just trying to avoid injuries, which we'll get into. Some major stuff happened last night. But it's always great, like I say, man, to be talking with you guys, talking with you about baseball and having everybody out there listen. And thank you guys so much for your continued support.
Yeah, tons of things baseball going around, like not just inside of MLB, but MLB The Show came out, and I know we've been playing a lot of that, so that's been getting everyone hyped for the first pitch weekend that's been going on. Games getting started next Thursday, and yeah, hopefully that snow's just going to be gone and it's not going to be cold. But yeah, spring training definitely has been interesting this year as opposed to a lot of other years, because there's been a lot of injuries this year for sure. And I know every time I look, someone else gets hurt. And, obviously the huge news is the Giants, Madison Bumgarner getting hurt the other night, getting hit on that wrist with broken wrist, going to be out, I think they said, 6 to 8 weeks. So almost 2 months. And that's really going to hurt the Giants, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he was known as a workhorse before last year, and then that was kind of a freak accident that happened with the whole ATV thing that hurt his shoulder. So we were kind of, ready to see Bumgarner go back to that, 200 innings plus guy a year. And last night, he was pitching, and I believe it was a comebacker. He stuck out his bare hand to try to catch it, and it broke part of his hand. So yeah, that's what I've been hearing, 6 to 8 weeks. They said it's probably going to be 4 to 6 weeks. He's going to have pins in his hand to hold him in place, and then hopefully after that he can actually start to ramp up and throw again. So probably we won't see him until late May, early June, which really, like you said, is going to hurt the Giants, because another of their pitchers got hurt.
Yeah, and Jeff Samardzija, who he's going to be out for extended period of time, a month or so. He's just been having lingering issues all spring, so they're out with him and with Bumgarner. So I know definitely for this projection show shaped up, and I had to go back through and change some of my predictions with this news. But yeah, the Giants maybe I don't know, maybe they can swing some sort of deal, maybe trade. Try to get another starter in there, because they've really got to do something to keep up with the Dodgers at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, looking at their projected rotation according to Roster Resource, they had, obviously it was supposed to be Bumgarner, Cueto, Samardzija. Now it looks like Cueto is going to be the opening day starter, with Derek Holland as the number 2 and then Chris Stratton as the number 3. So it really changes the whole outlook of that rotation. Maybe if this was a few weeks ago, before some of the starting pitching like Lance Lynn, Arrieta, or as we'll get to, Alex Cobb got signed, maybe they would have went out and tried to get one of these guys on a 1-year deal to fill in. But obviously it's too late for that now. So they're really going to have to either try, like you said, to try to get somebody off of waivers that maybe gets cut after spring training, a veteran, or make a trade for somebody. Because, man, I mean, I had them, we'll get to our predictions, but I had them ranked pretty high this year. Was excited about the lineup and their rotation actually being healthy. And the two workhorses, Bumgarner and Samardzija, who are always, out there for 180, 200 innings, are now going to start the year on the DL. So it's going to change things a lot, I think.
Yeah, and on the flip side of things is his counterpart for that Thursday night game, which we were really excited for, since it's going to be Bumgarner versus Kershaw. On the other side of things is Kershaw this spring has a 0 ERA. He's not giving up a run. It looks amazing. In that Friday win against the Royals, he went 6 2/3 innings in spring training, which is a lot of innings to eat up, only allowing 1 hit. So he's been pretty much on fire all spring, and that's not really another good news for the Giants if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's not good for any hitter in baseball, because when Kershaw he's obviously the best pitcher in the game. It's just been him staying on the field. It's that back injury that keeps seeming to linger the past couple of years, which is holding him down around 160 innings a year. So if he's out there again for 200, 220 innings, he's not going to have the same strikeout stuff that Chris Sale or Max Scherzer does. But, man, that guy, I mean, he knows how to pitch. He's got a devastating curveball. So if he could really stay healthy all year, go out there and just perform, like he normally does, and then going into, because like we talk about, he's a free agent at the end of the year as well. So he could just make himself a ton of money and make the Dodgers or another team pay for him.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be awesome. And I think the Dodgers will keep him, hopefully, because I just don't want him in the AL at all, because he's just so out of control dominant, and I just hate if like the Yankees or someone got him. But yeah, Kershaw definitely been lighting it up this spring, and another pitcher who has got me really excited, and I don't think I've ever would have seen this happen before, but Alex Cobb signing with the Baltimore Orioles. He got a 4-year, $57 million deal, and something that the Orioles never do. They never ever pay for pitching. The 1 year they did that, they went out and got Ubaldo Jimenez for 4 years, $50 million, I believe that contract was, and he was just disastrous and awful. Now, totally different pitchers. Cobb has been in the AL East before, pitched against all these teams, but definitely something has me hyped a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I know you were freaking out whenever you were texting me that they were getting ready to sign him. He's not a big strikeout guy, only really averages around 6 to 7 strikeouts per 9. But, he usually keeps a pretty low ERA. Before he had the injury in 2013 and 2014, he had back-to-back years under a 3 ERA, missed the 2015 season, and then coming back into the 2016 season, he had a bad year. Only he started 5 games, so he was still recovering for that injury. And then last year went out, 29 starts, a 3.66 ERA. Had about 180 innings pitched, so not a bad year overall. Obviously that ballpark's going to be tough to pitch in, because I think that's definitely a downgrade going from Tampa Bay's ballpark to the Orioles, just because Orioles is a little bit more hitter friendly. And obviously, he has experience pitching in places like Toronto, Boston, New York. So it's going to be a fun year to see what they do. The Orioles have quietly put together probably one of the better rotations that they've had compared to the past couple of years, with guys like Bundy, Gausman, and then picking up obviously your favorite Cashner, and now Cobb. So yeah, I mean, I think the Orioles are definitely gonna at least try to be competitive in that division. It's gonna be fun to see how well they can compete with Boston and New York. And obviously we'll get to our predictions in a little bit. But yeah, overall good signing. It was kind of interesting that Lance Lynn signed for a 1-year, $12 million deal, and then just a couple of days later, Alex Cobb gets paid. That was surprising in my opinion, but overall, that's pretty much the last main free agent out there. Obviously Greg Holland is still out there.
I was about to say, don't forget Greg Holland.
We could never forget about Greg Holland. I think we must have put a curse on him or something.
Listen, but, I will, Greg Holland, if you ever listen to this, which I doubt you do, we'll sign you as a free agent. Just come talk with us all season. I know you're still out there. We really feel for you, but you can come talk with us.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy. At the start of the offseason, all these free agent relief pitchers seem to be the only guys that were getting contracts. Wade Davis, Tommy Hunter, Brandon Morrow, they were getting paid, and nobody else was getting a contract. Now that everybody else has gotten a contract, Greg Holland is still sitting out there waiting to get an offer. Obviously, I think if he had to do it again, he would have taken the Rockies qualifying offer for the 1 year, $17 million. I believe after the June draft, that qualifying offer falls off of him, so he doesn't have that draft pick compensation held against him. So I'm sure if it does go until June, he'll end up signing right after the draft. But man, tough times to be Greg Holland. But overall, for as slow as an offseason as it was, it seems like pretty much everybody got picked up in the end.
Yeah, and one note for Cobb is he's going to be spending at least a couple days down in spring training, or doing an extended spring training with the minor league team, just because he's came in so late. So he's not going to be ready for the first couple weeks, but luckily there is that off day on the 30th that the Orioles have, so they won't necessarily need him until later, but they still might use a stopgap like a Mike Wright Jr. or maybe even the Nestor Cortez. So definitely be able to see what's going on. And, some of the spring training battles as well that we haven't really gotten into or talked about. One that I found really interesting was the Orioles chose to go with Chance Sisco, who beat out over Suzak and a couple other catchers that they had in there. So they decided to go with him. That's going to be interesting because, it's going to be a rookie season for him. And who knows if he's obviously has the bat. It's just the glove that's a little concerning.
Yeah, he was one of the rookies that actually did get to stay up. As we talked about last week, a couple of guys, Willie Calhoun, Ronald Acuna, guys like that got sent down. So it's going to be interesting to see how these guys get called up. But he must have obviously done some things to impress them since they had other guys that probably would have served fine as backups, like you said, with Andrew Susek. So obviously he's good with the glove. That's a good ballpark to hit in. So it's going to be a fun year for him. Obviously he'll get to learn behind Caleb Joseph, who's not known for his bat, but seems to handle a pitching staff pretty well. And overall, that's just going to be a really fun division to watch. You've got guys, obviously Tampa Bay is kind of changing up their team a lot. You've got the Orioles, the Blue Jays, who seem to be really needing Stroman and Sanchez to stay healthy this year. But yeah, overall, I think, in my opinion, that's the most exciting division in baseball. That's going to be the one that I think a lot of people are going to watch between that one and probably the NL Central. But yeah, the Orioles are doing some fun stuff over there this year. They definitely don't seem to be as big of spenders as guys like Boston and New York. So they're trying to hold that middle ground basically to stay as competitive as they can without maybe buying all the free agents up. But yeah, I think overall they had a good offseason at the end of it when you look back.
Yeah, and one of those. It's interesting that you say a lot of the rookies getting sent up, and he beat them out a little bit, just because I feel like a lot of these rookies have been playing really good in spring, and it kind of sucks with the whole clock thing and then sending them back. Obviously, you mentioned Acuna being sent back, and he'll probably I think maybe like April 13th is the date that he can come up and have that extra year service time. So I'm thinking that's whenever he gets his call up. Reminds me a little bit of, what happened with Chris Bryant, of course. But, yeah, definitely going to be interesting to watch a lot of these rookies this year. I feel like there's going to be a lot more this year than there has been in previous.
Yeah, last year, there was a lot of rookies that came up and contributed immediately, Bellinger, Judge, Mancini, Benintendi. So this year it's going to be interesting to see if they can continue that trend. You've got, like you said, a lot of guys. Ronald Acuna will obviously be up right as soon as pretty much that April 13th or 14th day passes, because they can't ask him to do anything else compared to what he was doing in spring training, But there's obviously not all rookies are doing that well. Ohtani is still struggling. I think it was announced that he will start with the Major League Ball Club. They don't exactly know which spot in the rotation he's going to have yet. But obviously we talked about him last week. There was rumors of him getting sent down, and he was supposed to be the best prospect in baseball. So you never know with these guys. Obviously, they're still really young. Willie Calhoun can hit. Defense is bad. Ohtani, obviously, really good pitcher. Needs to get that control under command, and just figure out how much they're going to use him as a DH. So I think, as last year was, this is going to be another exciting year for a lot more young talent to come in. And obviously, they have big expectations compared to what guys did last year.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said this in terms of, these baseball players is, you never know. And that's one thing I just want to let you know. You never know with baseball. So, without further ado, with never knowing, we do have our projections for the divisions. I know whenever we did our weekly division breakdown, we kind of rolled over and said, who we thought, would finish in certain positions, but that was before the spring training and some signings and seeing how injuries and seeing how teams are playing. So we do have our projections sheet for each division and how we have them ranked. So I guess what we're going to do is go ahead and start with the NL East, and I'll go ahead and go first here and say that in fifth I have the Marlins, which we talked about. Fourth was tough for me, but I have the Braves, then the Mets finishing third, the Phillies second, and then the Nationals obviously taking home that division.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go through this one. This is the only division, but we did have the same exact thing through up and down. Marlins, Braves, Mets, Phillies, and then the Nationals. It's pretty easy, I think, in my opinion, to predict this way. The Nationals, obviously, they're kind of head and shoulders above the rest of this division this year. I thought, we did these separate as we have all the other ones. And I thought whenever I put the Phillies in second, that would kind of be maybe a bold prediction. But seeing that you picked the same thing, it doesn't really make it as bold, I guess. The Mets, the main thing is starting. They're starting pitching and staying healthy. And with the Braves, they have a really young team. I don't expect them to finish fourth next year in our prediction show. But for this year, I feel like this is probably how it's going to break down.
Yeah, and this is one of those divisions that is really tough because anything can happen in baseball, and any team can go on a hot streak and just outperform what people say are going to be projected. Hence, teams of past who have done this. And the Braves is one team for me that was hard to put them fourth because I feel like with Acuna and a lot of their young guys, Freddie Freeman's there. I feel like their pitching has made huge leaps, and they've put together a nice, solid pitching rotation. But it's just hard to, whenever I think about the Mets with Syndergaard and DeGrom, and they got Cespedes, and I can't put them above the Mets. Now the Phillies, I definitely have them second for one sole reason, is because of the Jake Arrieta signing. I feel like that puts them far ahead over the Mets. It's still close in my opinion, but I think the Phillies might have a younger, better offense than the Mets. That's the only reason I have them there. But yeah, definitely, without a doubt, the Nationals probably just going to run away with this. But you never know. The Phillies could overtake it. Something could happen. But I kind of like this prediction for both of us.
Yeah, man. I mean, the Phillies, they had a really good offseason. They picked up Carlos Santana early in the offseason. Obviously, they got Jake Arrieta just recently, and their lineup is really good. They have Cesar Hernandez, who seems to have been there for a while, a really good second baseman, and their top prospect, Scott Kingery, who's also a second baseman, has been taking some time at third base in case Maikel Franco doesn't work out for them. They can slot him in at third. I think he had a 2020 season last year in AAA, so he's going to be really good. Obviously, Rhys Hoskins hit the cover off the ball last year in his call up, and I think a lot of people were just worried about their rotation, which still, the 4 and 5 spot isn't great right now. But whenever you have Nola and Arrieta at the top, that's a really nice combo. And obviously Hector Neris as the closer spot. And they picked up Tommy Hunter and brought back Pat Neshek. So, overall, the bullpen's got some really nice pieces. Rotation has some nice pieces. And I really like their lineup up and down. So in a weak division where obviously the Marlins are rebuilding, the Braves are still in a rebuild, I think the Phillies could definitely, like you said, have a really good year. We don't talk about managers a lot. I really like their new manager, Gabe Kapler. And that, it's going to be interesting to see how that team and the Braves can continue to grow from being a young team to trying to become competitive.
Yeah, definitely. And moving forward from that is the NL Central, which to me wasn't really hard to predict. I have the Cubs finishing first in that division. I have the Brewers second. I have the Cardinals third. I have the Reds fourth, and then the Pirates fifth.
Yeah, this was, I was a big Brewers fan this offseason with the moves they made. So I actually have them winning the NL Central. I do have the Cubs finishing second, the Cardinals third, Reds fourth, and the Pirates fifth.
Yeah, and the interesting thing here is I like your Brewers finishing first because I think the Brewers are going to be really good. But every time I think about the Brewers, I keep thinking about their offense. Oh, man, their offense is so great. Yelich, Kane, Thames, if he matches what he did last year, Travis Shaw, Braun. And then I think about their pitching, and I'm like, man, their pitching isn't that great. Because there's some guys on there that just throw me off, like Garado. Chase Anderson's okay. And the Cubs, with Darvish, I feel like they're amped. They're talking about it a lot this spring. They're looking great. I feel like they're going to be really good again this year. Although I do like that Brewers pick first for you.
Thanks, man. The Cubs have a much better starting rotation. There's no doubt about it. The Brewers have, I think, a better offense just because I really do like Yelich, and I think Lorenzo Cain's going to have a really good year for them. And I really like the Brewers bullpen. Corey Knebel was awesome last year. They have a really young prospect. You know him familiar from the Orioles, Josh Hader. They brought in Matt Albers, Jeremy Jeffries. So compared to the Cubs bullpen, which kind of has some question marks in the back end, Brandon Morrow's never really been a closer for a long time, so we'll see what he can do. They have young guys, Carl Edwards Jr. So I think the Brewers, and they also have their best starting pitcher last year, Jimmy Nelson, who injured his shoulder running the bases. He's going to come back sometime, middle of June, late June. And he's going to be a really nice piece for them. And they still have Domingo Santana and Keon Broxton as on the bench that they could trade for starting pitchers sometime during the year. So I think this division's really fun, especially the top three, because we're not really talking about the Cardinals, but it really wouldn't, I don't think, surprise either one of us if the Cardinals make some moves or even keep the same team. They finish higher than what we have projected. But overall, I just really like the Brewers' offense. I like their bullpen, and I think their starting pitching will be enough to push them in front of the Cubs for the NL Central.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I like their bullpen a lot. Their starters just don't really entice me, but yeah, they could definitely trade if they keep it together. I definitely think it'll be a close division, and I agree the Cardinals wouldn't surprise me if they shoot back up on top. I just feel like the Cubs, it might be one of the Cubs' years again to get rolling. So moving on now for our last NL division, we do have the NL West. And I do want to say that I recently changed this, like I said, once the injury with Bumgarner happened. I did originally have the Giants winning this division. However, now my predictions are the Dodgers winning it. I have the Rockies second, the Giants third, the Diamondbacks fourth, and then the Padres fifth.
Yeah, I'm going with the Dodgers first. I still have the Giants finishing second, the Rockies third, the Diamondbacks fourth, and the Padres at fifth.
Yeah, and really the reason why is those first couple months for me is just so crucial, and being without like that caliber of a pitcher for the first 2 months, you see how it just crushed them last year, and they just were not the same. Now their offense has gotten a lot better. They made a lot of moves, and it really does suck for the Giants that both these injuries cropped up because their front office has put together a really solid team this year. But now when you look at it, like if Cueto it doesn't get back on track, it could be really rough because right now Cueto's their best pitcher in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And the Diamondbacks, obviously the Padres are rebuilding. They picked up Hosmer, but I don't think they're really trying to compete this year, maybe as much as next year. The Diamondbacks, I really like their rotation. Robbie Ray, Taijuan Walker, Zach Greinke, Patrick Corbin, Zach Godley. They have a really good 5 starters. I think the offense, especially now, because apparently there's word that Steven Souza is going to miss the first couple of weeks with starting on the DL. So I really think that offense, especially after losing JD Martinez, is going to be probably holding them back a little bit. The Rockies, obviously they play in Coors Field, so the offense is going to be there. Still, you got to wonder about the starting pitcher. And the Giants, I really like, like I said, what they did with the offense this year. I think the bullpen's going to have a bounce back year. Melanson's going to be, probably hopefully healthy. They picked up Tony Watson. They still have Will Smith that they got from the Brewers a couple years ago that's coming back from Tommy John, so he could be in there. But at the end of the day, I don't see them or anyone else in that division taking the Dodgers off the throne there. As you talked about, Kershaw's been amazing. They have 5 starters in Wood, Maeda, Rich Hill, Hungjin Ryu, and then they still have guys like Walker Buehler in the minors that they could call up whenever one of these guys gets hurt or struggle. So, the lineup's good. Obviously, Justin Turner's going to start the year on the DL with that broken wrist, but I think they have enough pieces in Logan Forsythe, Chase Utley, Kike Hernandez that they'll be able to cover it for long enough until he gets back.
Yeah, and the thing about the Rockies is I think that they had a solid year last year whenever making it through into the playoffs, and I think they're just going to keep getting better. I agree that their starting pitching is a huge question mark because it is in Colorado, and the ball just flies out of that baseball park. So I do like John Gray. I think he's a really solid pitcher for them. They did get Wade Davis, so their bullpen is pretty good with Davis, Jake McGee. So I don't know if the Giants can really, right the ship. I know it's a little bit early to say it, but I feel like losing Bumgarner for, that month, 2 months, is just kind of it for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough, because like I said, I mean, I think the top four in that division could compete. If Arizona maybe picked up maybe like a Domingo Santana from the Brewers, or just a bat until, if Souza doesn't really supply what they need, or Jared Dyson's is more just like a speed guy, or the Rockies, if they can figure out their starting pitching, John Gray steps up, Tyler Anderson works out all right for him. And like you said, they have a really good bullpen. It wouldn't surprise me if the Giants go, I have them second. If they finish fourth, it really wouldn't shock me either, because obviously last year they were one of the worst teams in baseball. But I really like Longoria and McCutchen. I think they'll have, strong years, maybe getting a change of scenery. If Brandon Belt can ever stay healthy, he's a solid first baseman. Brandon Crawford obviously plays really good defense shortstop. But yeah, right now, you're worried about their rotation, and for good reason. I mean, obviously, you don't want to have to look and see Derek Holland, Chris Stratton, Ty Block as the 2, 3, and 4 compared to the other guys in this division. When you have, Alex Wood or Taijuan Walker slated to go against the Derek Holland, it's just not going to work out for you too often.
Yeah, and the thing is, if those guys can patch it together and wait for Bumgarner to come back, there is also the issues of, since it's his pitching hand, how good is Bumgarner going to be when he comes back? I mean, is he going to get right back into the mix? So you're talking about 2 months, but then you could also add in that third month of just trying to get the feel for the ball again. So, I mean, if they can, patch it together a little bit in the meantime, I feel like maybe they might have a chance to getting there. I mean, the team that could surprise me from this division, of course, is the Padres. Of course, they have that surprise factor that they could just put it together. Of course, they got Hosmer this year. They got Manuel Margot out there. They brought Chase Headley back. They have Will Myers. They got a lot of good pieces. They have Austin Hedges, of course. So that's a team that could surprise me. I do see them finishing last, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Padres. Their lineup's pretty good. Manuel Margot, Will Myers. Like you said, they picked up Eric Hosmer on that big contract. And I really like their closer, Brad Hand, former Marlins starting pitcher. He's went over to the Padres, became a closer, and he's really been lights out. But I think the big glaring weakness on this team is obviously the rotation. They've got Clayton Richard as the opening day starter, with familiar face Tyson Ross as the number 2, Brian Mitchell at their number 3, and then they have young guys, Denilson Lamet and Luis Perdomo at their 4 and 5 spots. So, obviously they have a ton of prospects, one of the best prospects in baseball at Fernando Tatis Jr., and some good starting pitching prospects. But right now, I just don't see that rotation as being nearly competitive enough to put them above maybe the Diamondbacks, Rockies, or the Giants.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So moving on to the AL, we're going to go ahead and leave the most controversial for last with the AL East. We're going to start with the AL West, and in the AL West, I have the Astros winning it. I have the Angels second. I have the Rangers third, the Mariners fourth, and then the Athletics fifth.
I went Astros 1 as well, the Angels second, the Mariners in third, the Rangers in fourth, and then the Oakland A's at 5.
Yeah, and the big thing here is the Angels obviously made huge upgrades. Even without the Ohtani, they have a lot of good pieces coming back. They have Upton, of course, for a full year. Obviously the best player in baseball, Mike Trout's there. So it's definitely going to be a good year for the Angels. I don't think they can overtake the Astros, because the Astros are just super good throughout the whole year. And I think the biggest surprise here for me is I think the Rangers are going to be a lot better than people think, and the Mariners fourth, but I think that third and fourth is going to be really close.
The Astros, we don't even have to talk about them. They were the best team in baseball, won the World Series, and they got better this year. They picked up Garrett Cole. They really only lost Carlos Beltran. So their team is stacked lineup, bullpen, starting pitching. The Astros are awesome this year. I think it would be a really shock if they didn't win the division. The Angels, yeah, they're kind of a popular pick this year. I really like Garrett Richards. I think he's going to have a good year. I think they're going to go with a six-man rotation, so it'll be really interesting to see how that works out for them. Obviously, they're going to have Justin Upton for a full year. They're going to have Ian Kinsler, who they brought in. Obviously, if Mike Trout can stay healthy, they brought in Zach Cozart, and they still have Simmons at shortstop. So I really like that lineup. Starting pitching is pretty good for him. I think the bullpen's going to be a question mark for him right now. They have a competition between Cam Bedrosian and Blake Parker to be their closer. So that's kind of a question mark, but it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to pick someone up. The Mariners, I think Felix is going to have a good year. He's going to have a bounce back year, which they obviously need. James Paxton was really good last year when he was healthy. Mike Leake's a solid number 3 or 4 guy, and I really like their closer Edwin Diaz. So I like those 3 teams, and then I think there's a pretty good drop off. I think you've kind of been higher on the Rangers this offseason than I've been. I'm just not sold on their starting rotation or their bullpen at all. And the Oakland A's, who you mentioned a few weeks back when we were talking about the AL West as being a young, exciting team, especially in their lineup. I don't really know if I bought it back then, but now the more that I looked at it and they brought in, Jonathan Lucroy, I think I'm with you. They have a really nice lineup, a really young team, young starting pitchers as well, and they're going to be a fun team. So it wouldn't surprise me if they maybe finished 4th over the Rangers. But overall, I think this one's going to be the Astros division to lose pretty much.
Oh yeah, definitely. The Astros division to lose. It's going to be hard for them to take over. But yeah, the Athletics. I mean, they could shock us. They could move up the rankings. Definitely not like overtake the division, but maybe a wild card. They have a lot of solid young guys and good hitters. Of course, with Chris Davis there with the K, of course. Jed Lowry, I think, has always been pretty solid. Matt Joyce is good average OBP player. Marcus Semien, Matt Chapman, and then obviously Jonathan Lucroy whenever he came in. So I definitely think their team is really good. They have a lot of good young starting pitching. The Moneyball thing obviously still going on there. So all these guys can get on base and also pitch well. So I do like the Athletics. I can't move them out of 5th though, just because I think all these other teams have proven that they can be better. And next year, just like we were saying, with the Braves not going to be 4th, I don't think the Athletics will be 5th in my book next year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the lineup seems to be pretty much set. They've got young guys, like you said. I think Matt Chapman's going to be a stud at third base. Matt Olson obviously brings a ton of power with K-Rus Davis at the DH spot. They picked up Steven Piscotty, and they still have prospects that they acquired in that Sonny Gray trade, Dustin Fowler and Jorge Mateo, who haven't really gotten a chance to show up in the major leagues yet. But I think they'll be really good. Their starting pitching is definitely going to be a question mark for Oakland, just because I really like Sean Manaea, but he seems to, not really been able to be consistent lately. Kendall Graveman, Daniel Magden, and Andrew Triggs are all really young. The Rangers, I'm worried because, when Cole Hamels is your ace, which a few years ago, even a couple years ago, that would have been awesome. Now he's their ace, and he's been struggling last year. Matt Moore, I've already talked about. I think he's going to get demolished in that ballpark. Doug Fister had a good year with Boston last year, but he's getting up there in age, so you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Mike Minor, who was with Kansas City last year, was actually a really good reliever. They're now putting him in the rotation, so it'll be interesting to see how he works out. And then Martin Perez, who had a pretty good second half last year, but then obviously had that injury, I believe, with a bull in the offseason. So he's, it's going to be interesting to see whenever he comes back. But, yeah. I mean, I think it wouldn't surprise me too much if Texas, maybe they try to sell off a couple of these pieces at the All-Star break, maybe an Adrian Beltre, Elvis Andrews even, but I think they'll probably keep him. Shin-Soo Choo or Cole Hamels, if they can get some prospects for him, since I don't see them coming anywhere close beating the Astros this year, or maybe even a couple years to come. So maybe just do a quick retool, make another chance at him with maybe some younger, core guys, basically. But Oakland's going to have a fun year. LA's going to have, the Anaheim's going to have a fun year, just because I think they're the only true competitor with the Astros this year.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And if you are a Texas Rangers fan, I would like to give you a little glimmer of hope as well. I think this is going to be a breakout year for Joey Gallo. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think he's going to lead the American League in home runs.
Yeah, man. I mean, that dude's got light tower power. That's obviously a bold prediction since Stanton and Judge are now on the, Stanton's now on the Yankees with Judge. But Joey Gallo's got, he crushes the ball. Obviously the batting average is bad. Strikeouts are bad, but he walks a good bit. And obviously whenever he gets a pitch he can crush, he usually doesn't miss those opportunities too much.
Yeah, and so what we're going to do is move on now to the AL Central, and these next two divisions, I just want to say that I think that we need to have a little bit of bold predictions on this show, so I brought that to the table a little bit here, and in the AL Central, I have the Twins actually winning this division. I have the Indians finishing second, the White Sox third, the Royals fourth, and then the Tigers fifth.
Yeah, when you say bold, that's pretty bold. I've got Cleveland winning the division, the Twins second, White Sox third, Royals fourth, and the Tigers fifth.
I think that the Twins are really, really underrated in a lot of people's eyes. I think Cleveland is obviously really good. We talk about them all the time. Their pitching, their offense. Everything about Cleveland is amazing. I don't know. I feel like the Twins are definitely going to put it together this year. I mean, you never know. Kluber could just have an off year and just pretty much turn to booty do, in my opinion.
Man, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Minnesota does maybe make a wild card spot or definitely compete with one. But I do not see them taking over Cleveland. I love Cleveland's lineup. They've got Lindor, they've got Ramirez, they've got Edwin, they've got Bradley Zimmer at center field this year, who I think is going to be really good. But the lineup is probably the weakest spot on the team. They've got Kluber, Carrasco, who I have finishing in the top of the AL Cy Young, Trevor Bauer, Mike Clevenger, and then their biggest strength is probably their bullpen. They lost Brian Shaw; he went to the Rockies, I believe, but they still have Cody Allen, still have Andrew Miller. Those are two of the best relievers, especially Miller, in the game. So obviously, they have a great manager in Tito Francona. Minnesota made some good moves this year. There's no doubt about it. They picked up Addison Reed, who I think is a really good relief pitcher. Obviously, they fixed that rotation, especially recently. Jake Odorizzi and Lance Lynn. They'll get Irving Santana back eventually, and they're expecting big things out of Jose Barrios this year. But definitely a bold prediction to have them over Cleveland. Like you always say, baseball, anything can happen. It never hurts to be bold. But yeah, that'll definitely be one that would surprise me, and I believe a lot of people out there if that did end up happening.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in my opinion, Indians may as well win this division. However, just something tells me that the Twins are just going to overtake it this year. Obviously, the last three teams in this division, of course, the White Sox, the Royals, and the Tigers, I don't think. I mean, they're going to be really battling it out for fifth. In my opinion, the 3, 4, and 5 are all just 5 teams to me.
Well, with the Twins, if they're going to win the division, obviously, as just came out recently, Miguel Sano is not going to be suspended for anything that happened this offseason. They're going to need big years out of Sano. They'll need big years out of Byron Buxton, Max Kepler. Obviously, it hurts that their shortstop's now gone for 80 games and Jorge Polanco, like we talked about last week. So they're going to need, a lot of guys to step up. When it comes to the White Sox, they're a young team, really young, obviously have really good prospects, Giolito, Michael Kopech. They've got, a Cuban prospect, Luis Robert, who I don't believe will be up this year. But still, the White Sox definitely are looking more towards the future. Still have some guys like Yohan Moncada and Jose Abreu, but I don't think this year they're really expecting to compete. If they did, it would obviously be a surprise, I think, to everybody, even White Sox fans. So they're looking more towards the future. They're kind of on the back end of that, almost towards the end of the rebuild, while the Royals and Tigers are probably just going into the rebuild, so their fans probably aren't going to be as optimistic. For Royals fans, you brought back Mike Moustakas. You get to watch him with Salvador Perez, Whit Merrifield, Jorge Soler. So they have a couple exciting pieces. Same thing with the Tigers. You still have Miggy, you have Castellanos, you have Victor Martinez. So with those two teams, you're more just looking for young guys. You're getting to enjoy watching some of the veterans that have been around for a while. But I have the Indians as probably the best team in the American League. So I just can't pick the Twins over them. But I like being bold, and you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like being bold too, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that I got a second bold prediction here for you, and then the AL East. And I do want to note, even though I am an Orioles fan, this is not homerism at all. I do have the Orioles finishing first. I have the Yankees second. I have the Red Sox third. I have the Rays fourth, and then the Blue Jays fifth.
We might as well just rename the podcast "Talking Around the Baltimore Orioles" with Ryan. No, I have the Yankees winning the division. I have the Red Sox finishing second, the Orioles third, the Tampa Bay Rays fourth, and the Toronto Blue Jays fifth.
Yeah, and here's my rationale around the things. The Yankees and the Red Sox both have rookie managers. I think Buck Showalter is probably one of the best when it comes to managing a bullpen. Of course, the Yankees have Judge and Stanton, but I do believe that the Orioles could definitely, upset a lot of, games and take some and steal some here and there. Every year I do see it. Everyone does predict for the Orioles to finish last in this division. Other than last year when they actually did finish last, they never have. So I don't really go much into predictions, but you know what? I feel like being bold and just throwing something out there that I think may happen, and we'll see if it happens.
And before we get into our breakdown over this division and the playoffs, me and Ryan talked off air, and he told me he was going to pick the Orioles to win the AL East, and I don't have them making the playoffs. So we do have a little, lunch, steak and liquor bet going on. Where if the Orioles make the playoffs, I owe Ryan lunch of his choice, and if the Orioles do not make the playoffs, he does owe me lunch of my choice. So we just wanted to let that be on the podcast so everybody can hear, and that'll definitely be something to keep track of.
Yeah, so I just want to let everyone know out there, by the end of the year, I will be having a free lunch, and also me and a lucky fan will be having an Andrew Kashner shirt since he is winning the Cy Young.
Oh man, yeah, the Yankees. I really like. Obviously, who wouldn't like their lineup? They bring in Stanton to match with Judge, to match with Sanchez. Overall, they got young guys, Miguel Andujar and Gleyber Torres, that they could call up whenever they wanted to. Still picked up some good pieces as well. Neil Walker and Brandon Drury are going to be fine depth guys, are good guys to start. You don't really need to be great to be in that lineup compared to the guys they have. I think their starting pitching is going to be better this year than it was last year. Severino is going to have another year. Hopefully he can be as good as he was last year, which was awesome. Tanaka and CC are kind of just the veterans of the staff. And then they actually get to have Sonny Gray, and I believe Jordan Montgomery is going to be their fifth starter. So that's good. Obviously the bullpen's probably one of the best in the league. You got to roll this Chapman, you've got Betances, you've got Robertson, even guys that are not really known, like a Chad Green or Adam Warren. Those are all really good guys. I think Aaron Boone's going to have a great year being the manager, just because I don't think it takes a whole lot of skill to be a manager whenever the lineup is that good. Boston, I think they're going to have a great year. I really like their lineup. Bring in JD Martinez, get Eduardo Nunez back, and their starting pitching is going to be good. Obviously they've got Sale, Price back. Hopefully he can be healthy, and Porcello. The back end of that starting pitching is probably waiting for Stephen Wright and Eduardo Rodriguez to be healthy. But and then their bullpen, which I've talked about before, I actually think is going to be good this year. You've got Craig Kimbrell, Carson Smith, and Tyler Thornburg. Hopefully will be back from injury. So yeah, overall, I'll let you get more into the Orioles, obviously for good reasons. But I think the Yankees and Red Sox, the rivalry's back on. It's going to be a really good year for these two teams.
Yeah, I first want to also say that I think the Yankees and the Red Sox both good teams. They obviously have a lot of really good talent when you think about it. But there's a couple things I just want to point out. One, there is such a thing as a sophomore slump. I've seen many of players go through it. So now that the league has a whole full year of Aaron Judge, we'll see if he can put up, a second half or an encore, I should say, from what he did last year. And two, Stanton now has to adjust to a whole new league with whole new pitchers, which I've seen many of players who were a Stanton type caliber. Now, Adrian Gonzalez wasn't as, hitting all the home runs, like 50-some home runs like Stanton, but he was a really good player. And when he moved over from the NL to the AL over to Boston, he just wasn't very good. And then they ended up giving him over to the Dodgers, where he still wasn't very good. So, totally two different players, but that is two things. And three, I think Tanaka's overrated. I'm just going to throw that out there. I watch him pitch a lot, and I don't know, he gets lit up a lot. CC Sabathia is not the same. Now, Severino, of course, a top 4 pitcher in the league. He's the one bright spot, I think, of that pitching staff. But I don't like their starters. I never have. I think that that's the one thing that they're lacking on for them to be over the top. But Boston, it's kind of hard to knack on those guys because their pitching is really great, and I think their offense is good. So it's hard for me to put the Orioles over the Red Sox, but not so much the Yankees. And when I have them second and third, I feel like it's going to be really close for both those teams.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's going to be a really, that like we talked about, this is going to be probably one of the most exciting divisions in baseball next year. I like the Rays in 4th spot just because I really think Chris Archer is going to have a really nice year. I actually like sort of the pieces that they picked up this year. Denard Span is going to be probably all right for them in the DH spot. I really like Carlos Gomez. Your boy Kevin Kiermaier in center field. Obviously they're going to miss having Longoria there, but I still think they have a quality team. And the Blue Jays, honestly, their lineup they can't stay healthy. Devon Travis, Drew Tulowitzki, they're never healthy. I think Josh Donaldson will actually probably get dealt this year, in my opinion, since he's going into a contract year, and I don't know if they'll be able to figure out an extension or not. Their starting pitchings I actually like, but they just can't seem to stay healthy. Aaron Sanchez was out almost all of last year with a blister issue. Marcus Stroman already has some shoulder problems. I think he's supposed to start the year in the rotation, maybe just push back a little bit, but he still kind of worries me. And the rest of the guys, J.A. Happ, Marco Estrada, and Jaime Garcia, Happ and Estrada can stay healthy, but I don't really know if they're going to bring you a whole lot of quality. It's more quantity, and Jaime Garcia just can't stay healthy, So, overall, really fun division. Obviously, we've got a little side bet, lunch bet going on that's going to make it even better. But yeah, this one's going to be fun. And baseball is better whenever the Yankees and Orioles are battling it out, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I could look like the greatest thing ever, or it could be the worst thing ever. So I'm going to throw it out there because I think that the Orioles, this team, like I was telling you, I think it's better than the 2014 team. Now, you threw out a lot of good arguments with, Steve Pearce, obviously, but he had a ridiculous year that year, and Nelson Cruz. But Nelson Cruz numbers that year were pretty much the same as Mark Trumbo's from 2 years ago. Obviously, Mark Trumbo is hurt. And also in that 2014 year, Chris Davis, obviously, was out on that bogus Adderall, which the league knew he was taking, and he got suspended, so he wasn't for the playoffs that year. Machado obviously got hurt, so Scopes made strides this year to be better. I think Mancini, although it is going to be his second year in the league as well, so there is also that, he could have that sophomore slump as well. I think that I think the rotation is probably the best rotation that I've actually seen put together in the last 10 years, because all these guys are actually really good, in my opinion, who can pitch in the zone after watching guys who constantly walk people or just kind of just toss the ball up there. All these guys have a attack the strike zone mentality. So that's the one thing I do like. And also everyone just, predicts for them to finish last, and each year that they prove everyone wrong just makes me happy because I get to watch them play baseball.
Yeah, well, we don't have to worry about you predicting to finish last, do we, Ryan?
Oh, no, yeah, no, nuh-uh. So, into the whole playoff scenario over here, I just want to say that I think that it's really hard to predict because there's a lot of good teams this year. I feel like at least in the National League, there's at least 4 or 5 teams that I think are wild card teams, and it's hard to say, you don't get to make it. So without further ado, for the wild card, I do have the Yankees and the Indians both winning the wild card, since I have the Twins and the Orioles, winning their divisions. I do have them as both my AL wild card team.
And I went with the Red Sox and the Angels. Obviously I have the Astros and the Yankees winning their respective divisions.
Yeah, and as far as a winner, we'll just go ahead and break that down. I do have the Indians beating the Yankees in this one-game playoff, just because I feel like if you go to a one-game playoff, Kluber is going to be really hard to beat, and that's the guy that I figured that they would throw out there.
Yeah, and I'm picking Boston over the Angels because of the same reasons with instead of Kluber, I'm going with Sale.
Yeah, and definitely interesting wild card. It could be anything there. Obviously, in my scenario, I don't have the Red Sox making the playoffs at all, and that's one of the hard things to do. Of course, I have the Orioles winning. If I was just a drone, straightforward kind of person, just follow the model of the MLB, the Red Sox would be there. But in my scenario, they're not, which is, I know, ridiculous to some people, but it may work out, may not. Who knows?
In the NL wild card, I have the Giants still versus the Cubs, and I actually have the Giants winning because I figure by that point Mad Bum will be back, and obviously when it comes playoff time, he turns into a whole different kind of beast.
Yeah, and in my scenario, I did have the Giants actually winning that NL West, so I did not have them as wild cards. My wild cards actually do have the Rockies and the Brewers. I would put the Giants here, but as said previously, I just feel like without him, he's going to be super far behind, especially if he does come back. So that just has me a little worried. And I have the Brewers actually beating the Rockies in that one-game playoff as well. So, I mean, yeah. The wild card is one of those things that is tough. And like I was saying for the NL, is I could, put the Phillies here. Obviously, we don't have the Phillies, making the playoffs, which they obviously could. The Mets, who could make the playoffs and be ridiculous, like we talked about with the Cardinals or even like the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, there's a ton of teams, especially like you said in the NL. I mean, whichever team wins the NL the NL West, it wouldn't surprise me if the other three teams were wild card contenders. And then obviously, you're going to have the two teams, the top two teams that don't win the NL Central, and the Phillies. There's a lot of teams in the NL this year that's going to make competitive baseball for sure.
Yeah, and so moving on for the ALDS matchup, I do have the Astros facing the Twins, and I have the Orioles actually facing the Indians. And then the winners of both those is I have the Orioles beating the Indians, which sounds ludicrous, I know, and then I have the Astros beating the Twins.
Ryan, it's okay, buddy. You sounded ludicrous a while ago whenever you made the AL East pick. No, I've got the Red Sox facing off against the Indians, which I have the Indians winning, and then I have the Yankees playing the Astros, which I have the Astros winning.
So you have the Astros versus the Indians, which I think would be a really fun matchup to watch. That's kind of like a pitch on pitch, hit on hit type matchup, and I feel like that's. I would really pay to see that.
Yeah, man. I mean, that would be great. We've got two teams that will obviously have stud lineups. Two probably have the best shortstops in the game with Correa and Lindor. You've got Garrett Cole, and you've got Justin Verlander, and you've got Kluber, and you've got Carrasco, and you've got Keuchel. So I mean, yeah, obviously that would be a really fun matchup. And like you said, I'm not really going with the craziest bold predictions. I'm kind of just going with what I think will happen. And I don't think the Astros versus Indians in the ALCS would really surprise anybody.
Yeah, definitely. And for the NLDS, I have the Nationals versus the Brewers, and I have the Dodgers versus the Cubs.
For me, I have the Giants versus the Nationals, which I do have the Nationals winning their first ever playoff series, hopefully. And I have the Brewers versus the Dodgers, which I have the Dodgers winning.
Yeah, and I actually have the Brewers beating the Nationals, just because the curse is real. And I have the Dodgers beating the Cubs. So I have the Brewers versus the Dodgers, which, I have the Brewers actually making it pretty far in the playoffs.
Yeah. I have the Dodgers versus the Nationals for the NLCS. And then for my World Series matchup, I do have the Indians beating the Astros, and I do have the Dodgers beating my Washington Nationals. So my matchup for the World Series would be Indians versus Dodgers.
And I'm just going to lay it out all on the table, and I'm just going to say that I have the Orioles beating the Astros as well. So not only are they going to win the division, they're going to beat the Indians, and they're going to beat the Astros. So I'm just saying, hey, if that happens at the end of the year, I'm telling you, I feel it. It's in Ryan, the air, man.
Did you just hear that? That sounded like our last listener turning off the podcast because you picked the Orioles to make the World Series. No, all in good fun, man. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Orioles versus Brewers. I like the Brewers this year. I think that matchup would probably shock the world. So that would be, it'd be really fun just to see two teams that probably do. Most people don't even have them making the playoffs, much less the World Series. So, but I mean, with baseball, that's the best part. You never know. So that it's something that definitely could happen. I'm not going to put it under the likely category, but definitely could happen.
Yeah, and no one thought that the Royals would actually go back to back to the World Series and be there, and that's one of the things that is nice about baseball, is things like that do happen. Now, I did have really cool, I had, instead of the Orioles versus the Brewers in the World Series, I did have a really cool orange and black World Series, because I did have the Giants making the World Series. But like I said, with the whole Madison Bumgarner thing, it kind of just, in my mind, ruins it. Now, it could totally still happen. That was my original first thought, is Orioles versus Giants, but I did decide to go with Orioles versus Brewers, and I have the Orioles winning it. I mean, I'm already this far, so I might as well just go ahead and finish it up.
This is just getting crazy. I have the Indians beating the Dodgers in the World Series. My World Series MVP, no surprise, I have Francisco Lindor, and my playoff MVP, I do have Carlos Carrasco.
And I'm going to go ahead and pair you up with some Orioles MVPs as well. I have my World Series MVP being Manny Machado, and I have my playoff MVP actually being Dylan Bundy, because I think this is going to be a breakout year for both those guys. A lot of things go into me thinking for the Orioles. Like I said, none of this is like homerism because I like the Orioles. A lot of this is thinking of what they've done this offseason and how they have matched up in previous years and beaten teams. Like I told you, in 2014, they went up against a really good Detroit Tigers team and just crushed them and beat 3 Cy Young winners and Max Scherzer, David Price, and Justin Verlander. So who's to say that they can't do that again to the Indians or the Astros in a playoff-type atmosphere as well?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've seen the movie Major League when the Cleveland Indians weren't supposed to do anything, and they ended up, going all the way. So yeah, you never know. We'll definitely, as we do with this one, we'll tweet out the spreadsheet. We'll put it on the YouTube page. Make sure you guys check it out. Let us know how crazy Ryan is, or
yes.
anything like that. We'll definitely keep track of the points at the end of the year, as well as the award prediction show. So yeah, it's just a little something that's kind of going to give us a little bit to keep track of all year. Obviously, one of us is going to get a free lunch out of it, and it's just going to be fun to look back at the end of the year, to see how we ended up predicting all this stuff.
Yeah, definitely, and free lunch, free Cashner jersey. I mean, I'm just letting you know right now, at the end of the year, if this happens, I mean, you're just going to be shocked. I might have to come resuscitate you or something.
If this happens, Ryan, and you don't get a job with the Baltimore Orioles after all of this, then we have a problem. Because if you can predict the Orioles winning the World Series and Andrew Cashner finishing top 3 in the Cy Young, they need, obviously you're like a psychic, or you need to be working with somebody because you got some inside scoop that all of us want.
I mean, I do want to point out that when the Cubs won the World Series, I did call that before it even started. So I just kind of have a knack for those things. Now, obviously, last year I didn't think too much in it. I said the Braves would make not the World Series, but the playoffs, and they sucked. But you never know. Kind of whenever you break down things, could happen, couldn't. Who knows? Half these guys could get hurt. You never really know in baseball.
Well, I think the best thing is in about 5 days we'll be able to watch baseball, and we'll be able to see how all this stuff's going to break down. Obviously, as we were talking about before, there's really only 5 or 6 teams left that need to decide their opening day starters. Obviously, the Giants are going to have to pick a new one, since it was supposed to be Bumgarner Kershaw. Now that's going to change. You've got a Twins-Orioles matchup for Jake Odorizzi, new Twins starter, and then Dylan Bundy going for the O's. I believe making his first opening day appearance.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's going to be really fun. Obviously Cardinals-Mets, you've got Carlos Martinez, Noah Syndergaard. I've already got my sick day at work planned out. I already have the day off work, so I'll be watching a whole lot of baseball. You and my other friend DL are going to be coming over watching baseball at my house. We're going to get some good food, turn on some baseball. And man, what else can you really ask for?
Nothing. You cannot ask for anything else. From 12 o'clock, in the morning, from Cubs to Marlins, all the way up until 10 o'clock with D-backs and Rockies, is going to be watching baseball all day. Definitely a couple games that I have circled out on my calendar, other than the Orioles game, of course, that I'm going to be watching, is going to be 2 in particular, is the Red Sox versus Rays, which is Chris Sale versus Archer. And then obviously I did have Bumgarner versus Kershaw, but now it's going to be interesting. It might be Cueto versus Kershaw. I still think it's going to be a good matchup, but I also find that the Aaron Nola versus Tyran matchup is going to be pretty interesting as well as with Phillies versus Braves.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's baseball. It's always going to be good. If you guys out there, obviously we're going to talk about some of the big matchups since we'll probably be recording, 2 or 3 days after opening day. And we'll talk about the main matchups that are going on, any good games that have happened that we got to catch. But if there's anybody in particular, let's say you're a Blue Jays fan and you want us to watch the J.A. Happ start, and you want us to tell us what you think, just let us know. I mean, Ryan, me and Ryan just love watching baseball. So anything, if we don't watch it live, we'll definitely watch it later on in the day. And if there's any players you want us to keep an eye on, or just give us some updates. We've had some recent comments on YouTube and stuff telling us that we're kind of, almost their main baseball source for information and news. So if there's somebody that you're looking to get more news out of, or a team, let us know, and we have no problem with looking at them. Just watching games and breaking down the stuff that we're seeing on the field.
Yeah, definitely, and thanks to everyone who does tune in, who's rated, listen to any of our podcasts that we do have up on iTunes, as well as left a comment. So I mean, don't be shy, leave a comment, send us something to our Gmail at talkingaroundthebases@gmail.com. Like you said, just let us know if there's something you want us to watch, comment on particular. I mean, the only thing I do want to let you all know is come Saturday, March 31st, when Andrew Kashner faces off against Gibson, if Kashner gives up at least 3 to 4 runs in the first couple innings, just forget about last week's podcast. It's not real.
And, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Richard on the YouTube page. As soon as we post the videos within the first couple of hours, he's always out there leaving us, supportive comments, telling us what he thinks about the season coming up. He's a Rangers fan. So I just wanted to give him a big shout out because that guy seems to have been there since our first video, and he's still out there commenting as soon as we post them pretty much. So just a big shout out to him, a big shout out to all of our fans, except Ryan, who's obviously a big homer. But yeah, man, it's going to be great. Obviously me and Ryan, we live relatively close to each other. So he's going to be coming over. We're going to be watching a lot of games this year together, going to some Nats games, hopefully some O's games together. And we'll be, breaking down while we're watching it there. We're going to be talking about stuff that we can talk about on the podcast while we're sitting there at the games, watching the games. So, we're not big scouts or anything. We just kind of enjoy watching baseball. Obviously, we've been playing MLB The Show, getting ready for baseball season. So we kind of have a lot of baseball going on in our lives, and we just love talking about it with each other. And with all you guys listening in and tuning in, it's just been great, man. And we're so excited for this year to start.
Yeah, it's so close. These, during the season, it's going to be awesome because we'll bring, up-to-date live updates with you guys. When we do our podcast on certain days, if we're doing it during a game, we may even talk about some things that are happening during the game as well. So, you never know what we might do. If anyone has any comments, like we said, just let us know. Baseball next week on Thursday, really, really close, and I can't wait. So, thanks again, everyone, for listening, and thanks for joining, Logan, and we'll see you all next week's episode.
All right, man. You guys enjoy opening day, and we'll be back with you soon. Thanks, everybody.